partner associations, we believe that we can be a stronger advocate for this assistance. There's much more that's going on and that we're working on, but really you're here today for this session, remote workflows and collaboration. So I'm excited to introduce to you our speakers, Dan Gallivan, Director of Information Technology at Payette, and Michael Kyes AIA, Senior Associate and Architecture Team Leader at SMMA. Now, before we begin, there are a few rules. Because we have a large number of participants, you will all be on mute. For questions and answers, we thank you to those of you that sent us questions ahead of time. But if you want to share during this session, please use the chat option in the lower middle of your screen. If the speakers are able to, they will respond to these. But because of the large number of participants, we may have to post these later, and we'll try to provide answers as best we can. Now, as you know, we are recording this session, and it will be posted on architects.org, and just as last Tuesday's session was. When you go to our webpage, scroll down to find COVID-19 resources, and that includes these webinars. We expect that this webinar will likely be posted by Monday or Tuesday. And I also want to share that our next webinar is next Tuesday on AIA contracts during COVID-19, collaboration and communication. We are still finalizing the time, and we do have one speaker lined up. We believe Jay Wickersham, FAIA, who's an attorney from Noble Wickersham and Hart, will be joining us, and we are finalizing a second speaker for that session. So without further ado, let me introduce Dan and Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Dan and Mike are here. We plan this to be more of a conversation, so not so much a presentation. We're only going to spend 5 or so minutes just explaining our firms. So I want to say hello. Dan, you want to say hello?
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Eric. As everyone knows, it's been probably a very long week for everybody. It's truly a unique situation. Everyone's been cast into in such a short amount of time. So this has been a great opportunity to sort of share hopefully what we'll find to be beneficial sort of questions and answers that we've received, and we're hoping we can tackle and at least provide some direction. But if anything, just a great opportunity to talk about a time together, and just remind everybody we're in this together. So it's a great sense of just building that community that we have. So looking forward to having a good talk.
I don't see it.
And Eric, can you mute on your side, please?
Wednesday at 1. Okay.
I am muted. I'm wondering if that's Caitlin.
Perhaps.
No, I think there's some lack of functionality maybe because of all of the Zoom. So if everyone, but please mute yourselves if you're not already muted.
That'd be great. And know that you can unmute yourself and heckle us at any moment. But I hope that doesn't happen. But regardless, I think we're all experiencing the kinds of learning curves and figuring out these technologies because we've been forced into it. I can probably say that a huge percentage, if not all of us, are on a remote mode now with our companies, and probably just the same way that we've been bumping into lots of limitations and technology that we just frankly didn't see before because of bandwidths and whatever else that Dan would know a lot more about. So this webinar, I think, will be maybe an example of that. I'm at home. You can see that my screen is here showing my home office. My kids, my wife are here. So it may get noisy at some point, although I kind of gave them a gag order for the next hour. See how that works. But I have to say that when Susan, Caitlin, and Eric had reached out to me to see if this, just on Tuesday actually, to see if we could put together a webinar for Friday, it was really great timing, because at that point I was just praying how I can help in this situation, and there's so much need, of course, and we can get into it. I mean, we can't get into it, but there's so much need for we're being part of a blood drive very soon. You can ask your neighbors to pick up groceries for them. There's so much that we can do, but at that very moment I was asking then I got the call. And of course I said yes. And I don't know how I would find the time. Dan too, we've been very busy this week, but we've found the time to put this together, and we don't have all the answers. You know, we're learning day by day, just like everybody else, but we're happy to provide a forum so that we can all learn together. And this is really just a series of things, as Eric was saying, that will be put together. And I just want to show this slide. You're not seeing a duplicate here. This was from last Tuesday's presentation, and it was terrific. Diana and Cynthia did a tremendous job. We don't want to speak about the same things that they spoke about, although there will be certainly some overlap, but I implore you all to check that out. It's recorded, as this one will be also in future ones. And yeah, just a great resource. Now, one thing I'll mention too is that Diana was from SAAM or SAM, and not to be confused with the company that I'm with, which is SMMA. So it's commonly confused in our industry. One slide too that was brought up on Tuesday's webinar was this one. And what was interesting about it, and it was explained in detail, but it kind of looks like SMMA. We have all of these different generations in our workplace, and I'm not going to get into any one of these labels or behaviors, but look at this in the recording. It's really interesting. But there's such diversity in our office, and it's one thing that I just love tremendously about our office. And now it seems that with everybody remote, it's a little hard to kind of stay connected and just be collaborative. So we're all struggling with these things. I just want to explain quickly what SMMA does. We do corporate and commercial. We do federal government. We do higher education. We do K-12. We do science and technology. All of those sectors are great to have some variation in our markets to really set ourselves up as experts in those separate markets, but also to protect ourselves in times of tough economic times. In this case, no one could have predicted that every single sector will be affected in some way. So it's certainly crazy times. Who we are is probably even more important than the different sectors that we have. We have architecture, interior design, landscape architecture, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, engineering, environmental graphics, systems and building envelope. We have sustainability, we have building science, we have just about everything. And I used to say all under one roof, but now that we're all under separate roofs, it's kind of a new world. I should probably mention too that we do have an office in Cambridge, but also an office in Rhode Island. And it's a very small office in Rhode Island, and it's an hour away. We think about ourselves really as just one office, with one of our studios just an hour down the road if you hop in a car. There's lots of people that work in both offices or half and half throughout the week. So we're familiar with some remote scenarios, but certainly not at the scale that we're at now. What you see here on the slide is really what we're known for and what we really enjoy. It's how do we collaborate, how do we integrate through all of these design and engineering disciplines. And it really is just a lot of touch points and a lot of analog situations that you see here, say with Post-it notes or drawing together or just gathering together. What you see here on the right is a typical pop-up meeting that we'll have in our open workspace, where we have these boards just covered with imagery and just impromptu leadership, just grabbing folks around these boards to discuss the project as it goes on. And then on the left, you can see we had an outing at Fenway Park last year for part of our integrated internship program, which is about a dozen folks every summer, students coming together and not only integrating with each other, but of course with those in the office. It's a really great environment. So we'll see at this point what we learned about being an integrated practice, and I'm sure Dan will also mention his aspect of integration now that we seem to be in some sense disintegrated. But our hope is through some of the methods and some of the best practices that we can begin to talk about, that we can remain integrated, and we hope you all too benefit from One thing I'll just mention briefly, or maybe two things, and then we'll get into questions after Dan's presentation as well, is just all the different tools that we have, both in the office, as if you've seen the analog ways of working, or the side-by-side kind of mentoring that happens in a space, but also using things like this, which is Microsoft Teams. And there are many different types of platforms that are there. But having everything in one place, we feel, is really important. And we've been getting used to this program for about 1.5 years. We've gone completely to the cloud, Revit models and everything. But this platform has just allowed us to communicate much better and individualize our designs. And finally, what you see here is another way of visualizing our designs. This is an Enscape walkthrough. In this case, we can grab the Xbox controller and just walk around and explore the spaces as if we're there. Or we could just click a button and go to certain views to highlight just what they look like. We can bounce into walls and get kind of crazy with the Xbox as well. But to be able to do this is just a simple SketchUp, well, maybe not so simple, a little more advanced SketchUp model that we're putting together for a pro bono school that we're designing in Nepal. And to get the team all on the same page, as well as the client on the same page, and walking through this through a virtual connection is very much possible these days. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are other tools that do similar things on your iPhone, and we're just really excited about all the opportunities, really, that we have in this new remote workplace. So with that, I'll just say that if you want to find out more about our company, you can go to our website, where we design places and so much more. There's some great stories on this website. And yeah, just looking forward to talking about the questions that you have for us. And now this is Dan's presentation, so I'm going to give him control. Be good to go, Dan.
Great. So some of you may be familiar with Payette. We are located in Boston. We've got we find ourselves to be a little bit of a unique firm in that we are about almost 170 people in one location on one floor, a couple floors upstairs from the BSA. But it really does give us a very unique office experience to have so many creative people in one space. And I find that that's one of the things about Payette, and talking about collaboration, that it really is an opportunity for our design to sort of to be very much a firm-wide single authorship. And it really does give us the ability to have everyone provide input into design projects. And it is really, I think, a unique experience to see a firm of that, size. We're not a small firm. We're not one of the giant large firms, but we're that a bit of a boutique feeling for a good mid-sized firm. So we definitely do a lot within the Boston area, but we also have a global reach in our projects too. And that also becomes part of the importance of how do we collaborate normally in sort of doing these designs when it's throughout the globe. And, we have that focus on healthcare and laboratory science, but we are also known too for other project types as well. And, one of the other things too, is Michael said with his firm being sort of very multidisciplinary, for a large part, we're very focused on architectural design. We have a landscape group in our interior design team as well. We're focused predominantly on architecture and can assist with that complete package, and then work with a lot of different consultants and some great partners to really help succeed and provide and deliver a great project. Healthcare planning side, or programming, and then a lot with our building science group as well. We were fortunate to be the recipients of the 2019 AIA Firm Award. We're very excited of that with our firm, and we feel that a lot of the recognition, we think, helps that sometimes we don't always do what people might say with either healthcare or laboratory science be exciting projects, but we really try to recognize that we're designing for people, and that it is about people, and it's about our people, and especially at a time like this, to be able to continue to provide that connection and learning opportunities and knowledge sharing across the firm. So it's important for us, I think, more than ever right now, to remain connected and to be able to continue sharing. We want to be able to do great work and deliver great projects. So, it's, again, as I was saying, it's a focus on science and technology, but how can we make those exciting and make it so that researchers want to go to those buildings and enjoy working in those spaces, even if at a time right now when they might not be able to work in their space, they might be confined to more of a home office, or to know that we might be actually creating a lab that, with this global healthcare crisis that we're in at the moment, maybe the vaccine or solution or studies can be developed in one of our labs, or people are being treated in one of our hospitals and spaces. So the firm has some great core values that revolve around people. And as I said, it's we want to have that feeling of collaboration, and it's seen throughout our entire practice. We also think of it as a bit of a studio. So for those of you who have been to our office, you'll find that in that open studio, it's a bit of a workshop feel. There's fabrication happening. There's the model shop is buzzing. It's not all about the digital design. A lot of it is, people leaning over shoulders with a roll of trace and drawings and marking up things. So it is very much that type of experience. And we don't want to lose out on that. As I mentioned, we do a lot within the New England area, but we have projects throughout the globe. So it's exciting to see. In fact, last night in the office, kicked off around 9 p.m. Eastern time, we had a client presentation to a project in China. And it was great to see that was happening without a hitch. There was no problem in conducting that meeting that had to happen last night. We also have a lot of diversity, we feel, in our staff and the number of countries, and we feel that that's important too, to be able to provide a lot of collaborative interest and ideas to a lot of the projects that we're working on. Much like Michael, we do a lot with virtual reality. One of our visualization specialists right now, he's doing a lot with computational design, and he's been doing augmented reality, taking our VR models, bringing them out onto the site in the form of an iPad and being able to demonstrate those. Or you'll see things here where we do full-scale mock-ups of in our fabrication space to study how materials can work, or different shapes and effects, lighting, sound. Our building science group is doing a lot of study and research in that area too. So it's been great to see. One of the things I wanted to focus on, and I think Michael's a bit of agreement for today, is there's no one right tool for a job. And right now is a time where, when we started sending out everyone on Friday of this past week to go home to work remote, coming into these next couple of weeks, we first of all were very hesitant in saying, the office is not closed. We're continuing to work. We're going to continue to do great work and deliver the projects that we've promised for our clients, and we're going to do the best that we can. There's going to be a bit of a change and disconnect. One of the things that I do find about our firm is that with the open office that we have and sort of that studio and workshop environment, architecture is unique in a way that it's a learning profession. You never stop learning from much like the days of when you're in studio and architecture school, and through to the people that are nearing the end of their career. You're constantly teaching, you're constantly learning, you're learning from each other. And Michael's slide showing the generations, I think, is important, because we've never been, I believe, at such a unique period where we have the 3 to 4 generations that we're working across. And you have the junior employee who's trying to transfer knowledge and pull it from the more senior employee. You have sometimes I call them the traffic cop in the middle. You have that, might be a Gen Xer who's being the knowledge transfer agent, who's pulling knowledge from the senior employee and feeding it down to the more junior employee. So, these are the events that occur daily within our firm. We have a lot of daily opportunities for people to share. We have that, one, just being in the studio experience. We have items like an alcove discussion where our team has these alcoves throughout the office, and they'll pin up maybe at lunchtime, and people will gather around, and you'll see everyone sort of demonstrating or showing off where they're at with their design. It gives everybody in the office an opportunity to provide input. There's also a more formal pinups or critiques that will be done too, where they'll go through and really maybe face a jury. There's also more informal events that we have where it might be like a meet the materials. Every Thursday morning a vendor will come in and provide maybe coffee and something to eat as someone's reviewing a material that they have to present, and it's informal. So on any given day, I say there's these informal and more formal learning opportunities. So this week, as we all sent everybody home largely to try to work and connect, it became a unique opportunity that we didn't want to lose that opportunity within the firm. So we ran our first virtual alcove discussion. Much like we're doing right now in Zoom, we use Zoom. So we were able to have a couple of panelists who presented their projects, where they were at, and gave an opportunity for people to provide Q&A, so people could ask questions, raise their hand, we could unmute them, bring them in, ask a question. And it was really a unique opportunity to see this happen live for a firm that normally does it all in person. We were also able to record the event. And one of the things that we're able to do with that is actually we can share that afterwards on our intranet. And that's also another thing that I found in the past couple of days has been important for us is our intranet. The intranet provides, not really that like Facebook social media type presence, but what it does is allows employees opportunities to share. Sometimes it's like projects that you're working on, or have you worked with this consultant, or have you worked with this material before, and they can ask questions and get feedback from others, but it gives an opportunity for people to stay connected. We also see informal posts, people sharing pet photos and things like that today was great to see. And just having that connection to the firm, but it gives us a place of sort of curating and collecting learning opportunities and events as they're happening. A lot of people have been sharing webinars that are upcoming about remote work processes. So it's really been great to see that sort of community sharing within the firm happening. And that's what we don't want to miss out on at a time like this. We want to be able to continue to have that collaboration. We want to continue that studio experience. We might be disconnected for a little while. We know, this isn't going to be a long-term thing, hopefully. We can hopefully get back to sharing it. But what we've looked at in the meantime is to say, what are the tools that we can use to continue? We have a number of projects that are using products and tools like BIM 360. So BIM 360 allows us to host our Revit model in the cloud, and we're working with our engineers and associate architects maybe in different locations, and it allows them to continue working just the same that they had been. So there's been this, really unique opportunity to sort of expand upon that a bit with a few teams that are sort of saying, hey, should we make that switch to there? And it's one of those, it's not a guarantee that it's the right thing for every project team, but let's take a look at it and see if it is the right solution for that team at this time. Or one of the things I'll tell people sometimes at a moment like this is, don't run out and make a lot of technology changes. Maybe now is not the time to suddenly try a new platform or a new tool. You kind of want to go with the tools that you're already comfortable with and continue using those. Maybe you can learn it a little bit different, but now is not the time for huge changes. And one of the things I tell my own IT group right now too is like a little bit of moratorium on projects and things. We don't want to roll out updates or install a new tool on something right now if we're not 100% sure it's going to be an absolute success. So, it is time. It's definitely an interesting moment. One of the things we want to look at as this presentation was coming in, as Michael mentioned Diana's earlier in the week with Sam, that there's a lot of questions that came into us, and we were like, wow, there's a lot. Some are a little bit of overlap in some areas, but there was definitely a lot out there. So we wanted to sort of take a look at that question list and see what we can help with. And we'll bring up some of those questions. But what we also want to see is if there's more questions that come out there today, because certainly as people have been working remote over the week, you know, there's new items and new things that you may have thought of. Don't hesitate to put those questions into the chat window, or possibly raise your hand and we can bring you into the conversation. So Michael, do we want to continue?
Yeah, absolutely. And what you see on the screen now is a great resource for everyone. I would suggest that you watch this. I think there were 65,000 people watching this this webinar that two of the founders of Basecamp put on recently. And what's interesting, if you don't know what Basecamp is, it's an online collaborative software, but more important part of the story is that they themselves use online and remote processes for their own company. I believe their company is something less than 50 people. But what they've learned over the years is some really great ways of working. And in fact, they have 2 books, I believe they're both by them, that are new ways of working. I have the one on the right, Rework, which is a great book of just rethinking everything that you know, pretty much, like in-person meetings. And this was really meant to just allow workplaces to work better, not so much to try to persuade them to work more remote. But obviously the book on the left is called Remote. And I think there's so many things that we can learn from other industries that have been doing this for a while, consultants, and that really positive that by the end of this great mess that's going on presently, when things do normalize again, that we'll be smarter, we'll be different, and we'll have some great new ways of working. And look forward to knowing more about that. I'm going to back up one slide too, because a friend had given me this slide as a link recently, which shows, and you should click on it at your own time. You won't get into it, but it's this virtual space, and when you go into it, you're an avatar. You can walk into space. It's kind of like going into an office. It really feels somewhat familiar, but I wonder if that is even what the goal is. And I have a list of questions here, and Dan does as well. And one of them is, how much do you think things will change with this new opportunity that we have? And I'll just start with a quick answer, Dan. I'd love to hear your comments as we have a conversation about this. But I think it's not so much replicating what we have in the real world, as this VR example sort of indicates, but it's about finding new opportunities of approaching what a digital workflow might give us, even beyond everything that Dan and I have mentioned already, the things that we love about our office and the integration that we can have hands-on. But what are those benefits digitally? Dan, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so actually one of the things, the book Remote jumped out at me because I think I told you this. I read it while I was serving on jury duty. It was one of those, we weren't permitted any electronic media. The judge didn't want our phones in our hands or anything. And I had to convince her and show her that on my Kindle, I only had these books on here, and I wasn't going to connect to any type of social media or anything at the time. I was reading the book Remote thinking, if I get selected for this jury, I'm going to be working remote for about a month or so. So that one always sort of jumped out at me. And then it is interesting because I think Basecamp started as a product that they were trying to use to manage projects, and they realized that this remote world existed in how people work. And I know myself, I'm always in tuned a bit with different workflows and how people do work. And especially even when you're in an office, there's a lot of distractions. There's, your cell phone and chat and, instant messaging, like you should, Teams and email and voicemail. And sometimes you're like, you know what? I just need to grab my notebook and I need to go organize my thoughts, and I need to go sit outside and find a spot to do that. And right now we're in that opportunity to do that a bit. but we also want to stay connected. So it is about finding that balance about what works best for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So here's a question. How can you feel like you're collaborating and expressing ideas virtually as you would sitting together at a table with Trace? I'm sure that many of you have tried to replicate this process, and yeah, hopefully find some things that work better, and some things that are really that are a struggle. There were a few questions that were sort of similar that Dan and I saw in this list, and it ultimately comes down to questions like, what is the best software for whiteboarding and for marking things up and for doing this or doing that? And as Dan mentioned before, we're really trying not to give a list of software options. I'm sure the BSA will be a hub for a list of options, and I encourage vendors to reach out to the BSA to provide and to pitch their benefits, so that we can, as a community, understand what are some of the leaders in this space. But Dan and I were talking about sometimes even the most simple of tech solutions can be helpful. The supercomputer that we probably all have in our pockets is just an amazing device. You know, the idea to be able to connect just like we are now with Zoom, be able to use the camera, be able to take a picture of a sketch. So it can really a dumbed down old school technology of a napkin and a pen can turn into a high-tech solution by sharing it virtually with many people at once. But we will probably mention some software also. We're not afraid to. But Dan, you want to talk about something that sort of replicates that idea of sitting at a table together with Trace?
Yeah, so a couple different things come to mind. And there's always, and I always say there's not exactly like one right answer, and I wouldn't say like it's kind of what works for you. Morpholio Trace is one that comes to mind. Like you said, you can take a picture with an iPad. Morpholio Trace allows you to do that sort of tracing, but that might be on a little bit more of an individual level versus a collaborative effort. Some of the things to look at, you know, we're doing this on Zoom today, and Zoom allows free meetings, and I find the audio to be fairly good with Zoom. Another one that comes to Microsoft Teams can be used in a similar fashion. Zoom, I believe, has the markup capability. If you were connecting to a computer that said didn't have that, Microsoft has a new Whiteboard app. And then also a lot of the individual apps might have a markup capability. Bluebeam Studio, if you're doing a PDF set of, say, drawings, Bluebeam Studio is great for doing that. And then Adobe Acrobat has a simple, markup utilities as well. So that would be another option for PDF files and for just using one of these applications.
And looking at the screen, Dan, excuse me, I see that Catherine had done a little markup right here on Zoom.
Yep.
So yeah, many tools are providing this ability to highlight certain things, because if we're all just looking at a screen, I may be looking at the left side and somebody may be looking at the right side. So really getting everybody on the same page, figuratively, takes a little more than being on the page, but really focusing exactly where on the page. Sometimes we need to focus. And Dan, feel free to you have this list too, to pick up any questions. And
yeah.
It's possible that we'll both have separate answers. It's possible that we'll agree, and it's quite possible that we'll disagree. I'm hoping we'll find some.
Eberts of software.
Exactly. So here's another question that has to do with virtual checklists. Asking about Trello, Planner, Shared Excel, Google Forms. Which are the best virtual checklists?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think you just mentioned there's a couple that could be used there. And again, it depends a little bit on your preferred platforms today. Microsoft Planner is another one that comes to mind, where you can do, if people are familiar with, I believe it's pronounced Kanban. It's a work style. It's an interesting, if you can check out the website, I believe it's personal Kanban. It's Kanban. If you can check that out, it's sort of like a personal workflow, but it can also work for teams. And there's a few apps like Trello that are based on that concept. Microsoft Planner is also based on that concept, and it allows you to have checklists right within those as well. So that is an idea that you could use. Sometimes people might do it in a simple PDF form with checkboxes. we'll share things like that on our intranet within our own office for doing checklists for, say, QA, QC, and for doing drawing checklists to make sure things are included. So that's always an important thing to do. And actually, so one of the things too is where people were mentioning, one of the questions I think was working with public officials. And I believe oftentimes now they are becoming much more receptive to digital documents and digital signatures. So that might be something to explore as you do look at different PDF documents.
Mm-hmm. Right, and on the checklist question as well, I would say that whatever software you use, I mean, can be a simple shared Excel, which, by the way, if people aren't familiar, Google has Google Docs and Google Forms, et cetera, that many people can use simultaneously and see markups and see people's names pop up and making changes to the document in a synchronized way, or maybe you can say asynchronized way, whatever, whenever people want to add to it. But the important thing is Excel. Well, Excel can also do that using SharePoint. And the important part about that is being able to have everything in one place, because I think gone or close to gone are the days when we start to make changes on our computer and then email some things and then email to other people. And then before you know it, you have 5 different versions of it. So the goal here, especially with something like a virtual checklist, is just to make sure that it's all in one place, that there's this, as they say, the single source of truth. But the bigger takeaway part of checklists is, I would say, is that people have to use them. Because if there's a team of 5 and one person's in charge of the checklist and nobody's really looking at it, then it's not really a helpful collaborative tool. It might be helpful for that one person, and if they're chasing down people one by one. But in order to have the most collaboration, which is the root of a lot of questions that we have had here, I think it just takes this team mentality.
Yeah, one thing I would say too that we've been trying to stress a bit with our staff is having that camera connection when you're doing web meetings to introduce yourself if it's someone you haven't met before in person, but also with your own teams, if just to have that sense of connection, to visually be able to see each other. You know, we've all been disconnected now from the office for a large part for a week, so it was good to be able to present to people with the cameras on. You can you know, maintain a little bit more normalcy in your work schedule, get up and take a shower, and because you're also in a position too that you're not only doing with this with your team, but what if you suddenly have to present to a client or a consultant and meet with them? So, you know, you want your lighting. Do you want a big window behind you that has glare coming in? Do you want,
wait, Dan, we do. What are we doing wrong?
Just things to think about. You know, get ready for it now so that when you have to do it in that professional or that more stressful situation, you're ready to go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've even found that there are some social cues that have come up recently, that certain women that we're talking to will not have the camera pointed at themselves. It might have pointed at the ceiling. And we've all kind of gotten a little more comfortable with each other. And I actually love it, you know, the fact that we're not wearing as much or any makeup. It's great. You just get to be a little more close, and I feel like people are just being a little closer. In fact, somebody might be wearing a hat, and then just to show solidarity on a conference chat of a few people, everybody just picks up a hat and puts it on. So we're finding ways of finding these social connections through this technology, which is really it's really delightful.
Great. Some of the other questions that seem to be coming in, you know, again, a lot of them were very focused on digital redlining and sort of that side of it. One of the other questions was collaboration across generations. And I think what Michael, you were saying earlier is, you know, that's an opportunity. You can help work with people who might be a little bit more technology challenged, and you reach out and do something to get them going. Whether it's a FaceTime meeting, something very simplified, you can help work with them to get them connected. So that's an interesting one.
Yeah, so some of the onboarding of these new technologies across generations is becoming It's difficult, but I think it's a great learning process. I think a lot of people have empathy towards those that, and it's not even, I'm just not going to say young and old. It's more about those that are more comfortable with the technology and those aren't. You know, it doesn't even have to be broken up per generation. But there's been several meetings in the last few days where it's taken about 10 minutes to get off the runway. And that's just fine. Everybody's been very patient and nobody's snickering. Nobody's sending notes to each other saying, I can't believe they're so slow. We're all doing this together. And I think it's leveling the playing field in some way about all these tools that in some case have been in the hands of some and ignored by others. So now I think it's just allowing us all to kind of level up to that same place and be able to play in the same sandbox.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know some of the firms are talking about what if you have to do an interview and you're going to be working with a client in the next couple of weeks and you're not be able to travel, and now suddenly you have to do that virtually. Practice, take that opportunity to find a friend or a family member or someone else who can join with their web camera and help you do that ahead of time. As I said, work out your lighting, work out, maybe having your wall behind you be utilized for drawings or even models if you've built something that you want to show, and get familiar with using your web camera to be able to, show those items and bring the client more into it as best as you can. So that, I think, is an interesting one that certainly a lot of people are going to be worried about maybe for a couple of months before we're back to traveling as much.
Mm-hmm. And here's a question that says, what is the best way to hold team meetings to track progress and accountability? There's a lot packed into that question, but what I've learned from that webinar that Basecamp has given is really the best way to hold team meetings was kind of surprising to me, because I was thinking, let's just replicate our usual meetings. If there's 10 of us, let's get 10 of us in a video chat, and there we go. And the suggestion was that let's rethink meetings a bit. Let's try to create platforms to get the real information all in one place. In other words, a shared document, a simple shared Excel spreadsheet of what the status is of everything. It can be sent out ahead of time. It can just live in one place so that people can check it before they have a meeting. And then when you get on the meeting, you really just talk about the things that that need debate. You don't talk about just statusing, and you can do that by writing it down. So why have everybody in a video conference just telling about something that could be written down? So that was really good advice that I'm taking in, that I'm going to be suggesting to my company, so that, and we've already in fact have done that. How do we take our Monday morning level up meeting that takes an hour with all of our disciplines in one room and talk about staffing and operations? What part of that can be done in a simple document? And then what parts really should be discussed? What kind of debates should happen? What kind of trading? What kind of things that need some true discussion? And in fact, even heard the advice on this webinar that we should use these meetings, these virtual times to get together, to really be more social. In fact, talk about what was going on yesterday, what happened over the weekend. Just use the meeting time, the face time, for more social aspects and less business aspects. The things that can be written down, they're really adamant in this webinar, and I also warn you that there's lots of language, but the points are really well taken. So again, the question: the best way to hold team meetings to track progress and accountability. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I was just going to say those. That's the human side of it, where you have to make that change from working in the office space or having those meetings together to maintaining the regular cadence of meetings. Don't let them not happen. They have to continue to happen, and get people familiar with the tools to be able to do it electronically. Mm-hmm. One I did want to jump into just a little bit deeper. So some people are asking about Revit, using BIM 360 and sort of working with Revit. And again, this is a little bit deeper dive. So BIM 360, as people know, is or may not know, it's the Autodesk cloud platform. And within that, there's a couple different product tools. And one of them is their BIM 360 design. It allows you to hold or host your Revit model in the cloud. So your team is loading and unloading the model, basically opening it from the cloud. And it can actually operate a little bit quicker than it does when Revit is on your own local servers, just because it's actually only uploading the actual differences in the model versus the way it would normally do a full upload, download of the whole model. So that is something that we've had a number of projects that have moved towards, because it's a great, easy tool for deploying any type of associate relationships where someone else outside of your organization, or if you have multiple offices, needs to share the same Revit model. So I really, we've had really good success with that particular product. And one of the other major things that people are asking about is using products like Enscape. So Enscape is that visualization, can do animations, it can do renderings as a real-time viewer inside of Revit, Rhino, SketchUp, other products. But Enscape has been a problem for our firm because we want it to be able to run over a remote desktop, and it does not support remote desktop protocol. I've told some of our staff, like, they're like, oh, so-and-so got it to open. It's like, okay, they're lucky, but it might not last. And sure enough, it might eventually crash, or sometimes just not even open. And it's always because no model is equal. Every model is different, and everyone's using it a little bit different. So whether or not it opens. And one of the other people.
And Dan, if I could too, I think we'll discover lots of workarounds as well. So one workaround for Enscape, like I showed earlier in this presentation, a way that we can share that model around the world in real time is creating an executable file. It creates a standalone, and even with our cloud system, we're not able to use the Xbox controller. To use a handheld device over the cloud. We can use the keyboard to kind of walk around, but it's not the same. So by making that executable and bringing it off of the cloud and sharing it through a Zoom, you can walk through it. You can't make any changes to it. It's not a live link to the Revit model as it would be on the cloud, but as a navigation tool, and like I showed earlier, to be able to walk around, even to change the sun angles. There's much you can do with it. So there's always workarounds we can find, and trying to find the most stable workarounds, to your point. Sometimes if it works and other times it doesn't. Trying to identify when doesn't it work, and then how can we find ways of resolving that. We just ran into that in several webinars, not webinars, but conference calls recently, and that we've had a lot of echoes, and maybe other people have experienced that too. And just trying to isolate, where's that echo coming from? Who's that one person in the 5 that is somehow technologically causing that echo? And we found it was very simply turning down the speaker on one of the desktops, and it all went away. So once we know what those things are, then share that information. Otherwise, we're going to have people tripping over the technology constantly. So finding a way to share those workarounds and really just pushing things until they break. Dana mentioned earlier not to invent new methods with new software, but taking the things that we have to rely on, like the Zoom meetings and Teams chats and all that, and then just try to break it and get to the point where it doesn't work, understand why, and then give feedback to the rest of the office so that everybody can get over those hurdles at the same time.
Yeah. One of the other things I would say too is sometimes we have a fleet of laptops that have the capability of running Enscape locally. So what we often try to do is, typically we want to find people that want to carry those laptops. They're not your, lightweight, small petite laptops. They're going to be a bit beefier, sometimes referred to as a desktop replacement. They might be upwards of, say, 6 pounds with that graphic card installed, and maybe even the power adapter is another 2 pounds. And, it's not something you're going to throw on your shoulder, but you're probably going to put it into a backpack. But we do find, too, that those are the mobile solutions that we have that people can actually use those types of technologies, off the network or at home or a remote situation like this, too. And then we look at other tools saying, Iris VR you can use the Autodesk Cloud Render, you can use V-Ray. There's other things to do renderings as well when you're disconnected from that. Another question that comes up, too, is, VDI. VDI is an area that we've been trying to take a deep dive into, and there's a lot of different, in what people, so you understand, VDI is virtual desktop infrastructure. So it's an opportunity for you to basically have the compute external to you. It could be a compute that you're using inside of the cloud. It could be a technology that you have it in a server, in maybe inside of your server room back in your data center that you're running. And now a lot of the VDI technology has the capability or the power of putting the heavier graphic cards into those VDI solutions, even in the cloud, that actually enable you to actually run some of those applications heavier, that have the additional graphic GPU needs. You can actually do those in those VDI solutions. So that is definitely a trend that we're trying to move heavily towards, rather than trying to do it on the individual workstations, just in that physical live and presence mode. You know, it's funny too, someone going through the questions that we did receive, and someone had asked, you know, about using like GoToMeeting or Teams or Zooms, and is there one that's better than any of the others? And I wouldn't say that there's one better than the others. Few of them sometimes right now, it's going to be interesting with what is happening, who are the winners. I have heard, and I'm just in my own experience, I know that GoToMeeting had a little bit of difficulty this week in trying to keep up with demand that was going on. And I believe I heard the same with WebEx, that they were having a little bit of trouble. So there's not always going to be one tool. You know, Zoom could have a difficulty, or Teams, but it'll be interesting to see who are the clear winners at a moment like this. And the other thing I would say too is on BIM 360, as Autodesk has been developing that platform, there's a lot more than just keeping your Revit model in there. There's a lot of workflows that are being built into it, or for even people who on your project team are not Revit users, you can invite the non-Revit users in to view your model. So if you have a principal on your project, for instance, that's not a big Revit user, they could go in on their iPad and actually view the Revit model and do a lot of great manipulation right inside of there. And likewise, there's other tools out there too. Revisto comes to mind, where you can do a cloud publish of your model and then share that with your client. You can do the markup and capabilities through there. So there's a lot of other things other than just that one. And that's what I often stress, is there's not one magic application that's going to do it all. You really do want to have, you know, a good tool set or a good toolbox, and be familiar with a lot of the different apps that are available. And one of the other things too that people mentioned about is bandwidth. You do need, with people especially working at home, you do need good bandwidth. I know a few employees, especially in the city, who, you know, only have a smartphone, and that's their internet connection. You know, that might not cut it at a time like this. You're probably going to need to go somewhere where you have a much stronger bandwidth to be able to power some of these applications.
Mm-hmm. And Dan is clearly an expert at many different, not only just software and what they can do, but really working with his teams to understand how to use them. I like to say not just the tools, but the techniques. And I think, again, the more we can share how we use these tools, the better we'll all be. There are tons of questions here too that are even beyond workflow and beyond technology, but really ask questions that we're all kind of grappling with at the moment, which is things like, how do you keep your teammates accountable for their responsibilities? I mean, it's a different world now. We can't just walk around the office and see people typing in their computers and therefore thinking that they're doing useful work. So now that we're all remote, we have to find new ways of tracking progress, new ways of establishing expectations, and being very careful we communicate with our tasks, just what our expectations are for turnaround time. For instance, if we want something accomplished, and if I'm thinking, Dan, can you do this? And he says yes, and I'm thinking it'll take about 2 days, and 4 days later, he says, okay, I'm just about done. Then I realize that, well, I didn't want a 4-day exercise. You know, maybe we shouldn't have done that at all. We could have done something different. So getting everybody on the same page early on and saying, what is it that we expect? What is an approximate budget of time? You know, we live in a creative industry, so we can't nail everything down to numbers of nails or certain boards of drywall that we're putting up as in construction. But in design, we just have to realize what are the things we're trying to accomplish in some form, in some scale, and then being able to estimate some amount of time so that we can then check in. So Dan, how are you finding, and maybe you've had some experience already with remote workers in your office, to determine if they're actually, I'll say, doing work when they're not in the office?
You know, it's funny. It's like the same thing can happen whether an employee is in the office or outside of the office. Are they getting their work done? Are they meeting their deadlines? You know, we're certainly understanding of our employees right now. Like, we want you to maintain your project work and what you're doing, but we all understand, like, my daughter's sitting across from me right now doing homework. You know, she's in a work from home, you know, school from home now. So it's interesting that, you know, that you are going to have those demands that are going to call your attention elsewhere. Maybe you had to work 4 hours in the morning, tend to some things in the afternoon, and then log back in at night to get your work done.
Right.
You know, those types of situations. But actually, I heard a funny anecdote from one of our teams talking this week that they actually feel more in tune this week than they have sitting next to each other because they're doing those daily check-ins of what people are working on. And actually the flow seems to be going a little bit better. So I would say, you know, that's one of the big things, you know, keep that maintained. I've been even doing the same thing with my team, although I've seen most of them all week, is just making sure that they, you know, they're being appreciated and making sure that I'm keeping up to date of how they're doing and how they're failing. And then I know that we're coming up to the top of the hour here too. And there's a lot of questions coming in about people, you know, asking about VPN versus cloud technology, all of which can be secure. And one of the things I'm actually very nervous about at the moment too, you have all these people on home computers that might be unpatched or unprotected.
Right.
You know, you want to make sure you're driving that that bandwidth through secure methods. I would also remind people that the world is full of bad actors. And what I mean by that is people are going to try to take advantage of everybody right now. There's going to be scams and schemes of, you know, buy this vaccine, buy this cure, or the phishing emails and attacks that are going to come out. So just be very aware of anything that you're clicking on, whether it's an email or a web page, especially if someone like, hey, I know Joe, and Joe just emailed me from his personal address, is not from his company address, and they're asking me to open this. Be very aware at times like this. You know, these are the things that you really want to be aware of. So one of the things I would say too is hopefully we can put up a forum or have a place where questions can come to, and then that we can help answer questions and stuff further, because I think there's so much to talk about with this that I'm happy to continue the conversation in an online forum that hopefully we can set up with the BSA. So Michael, I don't know if we want to bring Caitlin back in.
Absolutely. Caitlin or Eric?
Yeah, turn it over to Eric.
Yeah, and I think those last points actually are something that are really critical. We have experienced that this week, where we've been getting some hacked emails that have hacked connections, and so be really careful. They're incredibly sophisticated. They will pretend to be members. They'll pretend to be staff. There's ones that even had my most recent tagline changed at the bottom, that announcing the closure of the office. So they're, you know, be really careful about what you're opening and what you're sharing with folks. And I think that last idea, Dan, is great. We will look at ways of also being able to share information throughout the community. So I want to thank both of you and thank all of you for joining us. And please share your feedback at communications@architects.org. You can stay up to date on our latest news at architects.org and through Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And of course, by signing up for our weekly e-newsletter, Currents. We also hope you will join us for our next webinar on Tuesday that's focused on AIA contracts during COVID-19. And we're setting that exact time. It's likely to be the middle of the day, but we'll finalize that very soon. This will be followed by a session next Friday at 10 a.m. on construction administration during COVID-19 with Tina Stanislavski, AIA, and Sheila Kennedy, FAIA. And then the following week, we're working on a session for residential architects. So there's several things that are going to be coming forward. Before we go, I just want to take a moment to publicly thank all my colleagues on staff at the BSA. Like you, we are in a new world of operating, and we've been working on trying to build a new internal system. This week, we've shifted all to using Microsoft Teams, and we're learning how to host webinars using Zoom. So please bear with us. We're learning a whole new world, and also at the same time trying to figure out how to provide new resources and delivery methods that we can share with all of you. So we really appreciate all the work that's going on that you're experiencing and sharing, and doing the best that we can to share this with all of you. Finally, I want to ask everyone in joining me in thanking our speakers, Michael and Dan. We know that your lives have been turned upside down, and truly appreciate your willingness to take your time and share your knowledge with all of us. Thank you so much for what you do and for how you do it so well.
Thank you,
My
Eric.
pleasure.
Michael.
And thank you everyone on online here. Please be safe and be healthy and be kind to each other. And I think it's good that we close with some great advice from the police and Sting, and you know, don't stand so close to me. So thank you, and join us Tuesday.
We're all in this together.
Yes. Thanks. God bless everyone.
Thank you. Get outside.
Yes. Take a break.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone.